Only put off till tomorrow what you are ready to die and left undone. Pablo Picasso said that. Have you ever wrestled with things that you know you needed to do, but just find every reason you could possibly think of to put it off till tomorrow? Welcome to the life-inhibiting world of procrastination. Hi, my name is John Mylant, and in this video, I'm going to share with you why we procrastinate, the consequences of letting it control you, and how to beat it. So stay tuned, my friends. So flip on your focus and stay tuned. I once worked with this agent out of Nevada. His name was Steve. Steve needed to make phone calls. He hated making phone calls, but he knew that he needed to make calls in the morning. It was essential that he did this, even though he really didn't like to do it. So what was his problem? He would find every excuse he could possibly come up with not to make those calls. Sound familiar? These were phone calls to leads that came in consistently. He had a steady stream of leads coming in. He loved calling to people he knew he was going to work with. He couldn't stand making those calls to new people coming in that he didn't know if he could work with them or not. He just despised that. But he really knew it's something he needed to do, but he just kept putting it off more and more. So being honest, Steve knew what he needed to be doing, but he just was not motivated to do it. He could not motivate himself to do something he didn't want to do, right? That's just being honest. You cannot motivate yourself, my friends, to do things that you just don't want to do. So what were the consequences of Steve continuing putting off the calls that he just knew he needed to make? Well, his momentum started to slow down. As his momentum slowed down, the work that he had in the hopper continued to get smaller and smaller and smaller, till at one point he was in that old feast or famine paycheck syndrome that is all too familiar to most of us. And suddenly he was without a home to list or sell. Consequences of procrastination. Have you ever had an experience like this or known an agent who has? How do you solve this problem? How do you stop yourself from procrastinating, especially because there's just things you don't want to do, but you know you need to? So let's talk about this. Step number 1, complete and utter 100% honesty with yourself. You have to admit where you are, because this is your starting point. Steve had to admit and embrace he just did not want to make those calls. He didn't like to, he wasn't going to motivate himself, but he knew he needed to. This is the starting point. Your starting point is utter honesty with yourself and acceptance of that. So that's what Steve did. He said, you know what? I have to make these calls, but I don't want to. I despise them. This is where I really am. This is what you need to do first. Utter honesty with yourself. Embrace, this is number 2, embrace where you are and let it be okay. This is what Steve did. He said, you know what? It's okay for me to be unmotivated to make these calls. And it's okay for me to know that I could never motivate myself to make these calls. And it's okay for me to dislike making these calls. You've got to accept where you are and learn to laugh at yourself a little bit and realize it's okay. Does that mean he's not going to make calls? No, it's just, hey, listen, here's where I am, and this is how I honestly think about this stuff. Accept that. That's part of you. That's who you are right now. And it's okay. I am sure you have had experiences like this. And if you're like most people, you know what? Once you get started on something, you can get going. The real hard part when you don't want to do something is what? It's actually starting, right? Okay, so this is what step 1 and step 2 is. Step 1, just utter honestly with yourself. Here's where I am. Step 2, accept where you are. And Steve finally said, you know what? The hardest thing for me is just really getting started. I just make all these excuses in my head, but once I get started, I can get into the rhythm of it. I just have a hard time getting started. That's most of our problems. The procrastination is in the starting point, not in the continuation point. So accept and realize, okay, it's hard for me to get started. And then number 3, this is the strategy we put together. This gets hard because this is what we want to tackle, because this is where we have our procrastination problem, starting something. We decided to use Mel Robbins' 5-second rule. If you're unfamiliar with it, look her up on social media. On YouTube, you can see some of her videos. She's got this 5-second rule where you count backwards. It's about launching and getting something started. And that's what we needed. We needed something that would get us started. So here's what we did. We adopted the 5-second rule, and he decided he would make his calls every morning at 9 a.m. So we started a ritual. At 8:50, we started getting ready. He started putting everything in place and laying everything out, getting his computer set up, everything like that. At 8:57, he would start focusing on a couple affirmations he put together to speak to himself to get him ready to start making these calls. At 8:59 and 55 seconds, he sat in his chair and counted 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Boom, picked up that phone and started to make those calls without thinking. And we focused on this one day at a time. And you know what? It wasn't long before this became a regular routine. Did Steve ever love making those calls? No. Making those calls is not his first love. There's lots of other things he would choose to do first, but he knew it was very important for him to make these calls. So we developed this ritual, and over time, it became a habit and a routine and part of his life that is something he just did. So it's a very simple process. If you find yourself having a hard time starting something, number 1, be completely honest with yourself and where you are. Number 2, embrace it because it's who you are. Don't run from it. Don't deny it. Learn to laugh at yourself a little bit. Number 3, recognize that it's usually just the starting point that you need to focus and work on. Once you get started, you can usually get into the groove. Then put together a simple plan on how to create a ritual to get yourself started. The Mel Robbins 5-second rule is one of the great ways to do it, but there's other things out there that you can do too. You can do this, but you've also got to understand it may not be that easy. A lot of times we face certain obstacles. There's things out there we face. Some people do something, they have a habit called effective forecasting. They are always predicting and saying, you know what, in the future, things will get better and I'll do this and this is what's going to happen. And it's basically a fantasy and they're tricking themselves. And what happens is they just develop the same pattern over and over and over. Instead of addressing the procrastination, they just say, oh, it'll get better and this is going to happen and this is going to happen. And they forecast what their future looks like, even though it's not reality. And they end up getting into the same pattern and same routine over and over and on the same loop, and it never goes anywhere. Another thing that stops us is our own lack of confidence in ourselves. We may not say this to people, but if you don't have the confidence to do something, then you're going to continue to put it off over and over and over. Why? Because you think you're going to fail at it. This is huge. And a third obstacle is the quality of work people do is so low that it is impossible for them to learn and apply new things to their life because they're afraid of the pain of the growth, and they sit in their little safety zones in their own little world, and they're scared to grow, so they do the minimum amount of work to possibly make things happen. And because of that, they will never get out of their procrastination. These are the obstacles that people face every day. So why does this matter? Why should you face things that you are putting off over and over and over? Why not just procrastinate a couple things? It's not going to hurt you, is it? If you continue to allow procrastination to influence your life, kiss your dreams goodbye. Your low quality and low level of work will inhibit your success and your growth. You will lose the ability to grow into the person you need to be, and that means the application of the knowledge that you need will not take place because you will not know how to do it. And from there can come the physical manifestations of continued procrastination. You've got insomnia, you've got worry, you've got digestive disorders, you've got lowering of your immune system. These are all the things that can happen when you continue to allow procrastination to influence and have a big place in your daily life. This short-term avoidance of pain, which is what procrastination really is, leads to long-term negative consequences, often with emotional, practical, and I've already shared some physical manifestations of things that can happen to you. But that doesn't mean it's going to happen to you, my friends, because if you choose to, you can overcome the procrastination that you appear to see in your life. Just be honest with yourself, embrace where you are right now. That's number 2. Number 3, recognize that it's usually the starting point that has to be addressed. Once you get into a groove, you're usually pretty good. And then put together a simple strategy every morning to create a simple ritual just to get started. That's going to solve your procrastination problems. Listen, man, you got this. That fear of pain, that does not have to have control over you and dictate how you get things done. When you recognize it, take your time. Be 100% honest with yourself. Embrace where you are. Don't take yourself so seriously. Learn to laugh at yourself a little bit for being human. Come up with a plan just to get started. Once you get started, you will demolish the forms of procrastination that have dictated your life, and you will form these new habits that will help you get done the things that you know you need to be doing. Remember, you got this.